We're joined right now by Jay Town. Jay Town is a former district attorney, I believe, in the Northern District of Alabama.
U.S. Attorney, yes,
US
former
attorney,
U.S. Attorney. Jay, you are familiar with police shootings. Obviously, you have no details on this shooting, to be exact. But when you hear something like this, what goes through your mind?
First thing is anger. It's one of these things that I dealt with way too much as a United States attorney. Certainly dealt with it when I was an assistant district attorney in Madison County. You know, what we're experiencing across the country right now is in 2021, 241 law enforcement officers have been shot. 44 officers have been killed by gunfire. 93 officers shot in 75 ambush style attacks. This is unacceptable by every measure. As a nation of laws, there is no way to consider this situation anything but dire. In the last 24 hours in Alabama, Warrior PD has had an officer shot, and now Sheffield and Muscle Shoals police departments have had officers shot. This is unacceptable, and it's obviously, to me anyway, that the narrative about law enforcement, that they are not the best among us, that somehow they're part of the problem, is emboldening the criminal element. Offenders get violent, it leads to violence, and officers die.
We see evidence of their heroism every day. I mean, here in the newsroom. Is that what you think is the crux of this issue, though?
Men and women of the badge are the best among us. And they're our neighbors. They go to our churches. Their kids go to our schools. They are part of our community. So we need to treat them like they're a part of our community. They wake up, they don't know what today might bring. They don't know if they're going to be able to, if they're kissing their wife and their children goodbye for the last time, and they might not return. Who among us has a job like that, where every day when you clock in, that's a possibility? So we need to be mindful of that the next time we interact with law enforcement. And when situations like last night and today happen in the state of Alabama or around the country, we need to be mindful about it.
Jay, you were talking about the ripple effect here. It is not just these officers, their close friends, or that department. This really touches everyone. You've got their family, their friends, the entire state, departments across the region, the country that are feeling the effects of what happened right here in Muscle Shoals this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the FBI recently released crime data. In 2020, there was a 30% spike in homicides across the country. Who among us is safe? There's 241 officers shot this year already. Who among us is safe from somebody who's willing to pull the trigger against a cop or a sheriff's deputy? None of us. And so it impacts all of us when these dangerous criminals are on the street. If they're willing to shoot an officer, shoot at an officer, none of us are safe. So we got to let them do their jobs, pray for these officers and their families, and we got to find a way to interact with people and do it in a way that's human.
I think all of us would agree, law-abiding citizens would agree that this is completely unacceptable. In your opinion, what is the answer to this?
Well, the answer, it's multifaceted, right? I mean, law enforcement has to do it better, reaching out to the community and having those engagements and building that trust. All that's going to do is give law enforcement more leads on where the bad guys are, who they are. But at the same time, we can't continue to abide by this false narrative that we've heard for the last year and a half about law enforcement because of some very bad incidents that occurred across the country. That's totally unacceptable. But that doesn't bring in the 800,000 men and women of the badge that are serving our communities and our states and our country every day.
Yeah, they all seem to be painted with this broad brush, but usually the ones who are the bad guys, and other, for a lack of a better word, are being held accountable for their actions.
Well, they all should be held accountable, every single one of them. I mean, that's the point of law enforcement, is to hold bad guys accountable. But we shouldn't embolden criminals and bad guys or anybody whether it's just an assault on a police officer or some verbal assault of law enforcement, making their jobs harder, making the scene more difficult to control, or like we've seen in the last 24 hours, actual gunfire at law enforcement. It's not all the same, but it all comes from the same roots of this false narrative about law enforcement. We really got to tamp it down.
I didn't say it well, but what I meant was the occasional bad apples within law enforcement. They are being held accountable for their actions.
Oh, yeah. We've seen that right here in Madison County in the last couple of years. The Darby case is a good example, but that happens across the country. That's a great point. We have to hold those officers accountable. And I'll tell you this, every officer that I've ever met, every man and woman of the badge, the thing they hate the most is a dirty cop, because it impacts them negatively. And so they want to bring those officers to justice just as bad as the public and the victims do.
I got to ask you, as a former assistant district attorney for Madison County, what happens now? What are the next steps? Obviously, they're working together, all the evidence, but what are these next steps? What can we expect as far as a case like this?
Well, we need to find out exactly how this gunfire erupted. It's unclear to me how many individuals were involved, bad guys, that is, and whether or not they're alive. If they are alive, then the district attorney or the attorney general of the state of Alabama, Steve Marshall, will perform an investigation, because this was an officer-involved shooting. So there needs to be a fulsome examination of the facts. And then I'm guessing there'll be very quickly a grand jury that will convene. And if there is anyone responsible, then they're going to be at least be held to account.
Jay Town, well said. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that.
Thank you.